Hello, my friends. Welcome to Let's Talk, produced by Wise Mindly Inc. I'm your host, Coach Che Marville. In this space, we dive into transformative conversations that hopefully inspire you to grow, heal, and have a deeper connection to yourself and to the world around you. So let's talk, let's connect, let's grow together. Today on Let's Talk, I'm sitting with a woman who's not just changing the conversation about mental health, she's changing the system from within. Harriet isn't your typical corporate executive. She actually started off as a mental health nurse. She walked the halls of emergency. She knows what crisis looks like and chose to stay in the work, not just to help, but to rebuild. Now she's at the heart of workplace cultural transformation in Canada. She's a strategist, a mother, a powerhouse of compassion, and someone I deeply respect. But before any of that, Harriet was a young girl standing in Nigeria, watching something that would stay with her and haunt her for years to come, and eventually shape the mission that she's on. Let's begin there. Harriet, welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you, Che. Thanks for having me.
Now, how would you describe your work?
Oh, goodness. You know, my work has taken many different turns, and some planned, but most not. Most of what I've done has been shaped by experiences and situations that are happening at the time. So, like I said, I started my career as a mental health nurse in the UK. I was really interested in the mental health space, which was shaped by my earlier childhood, growing up in Nigeria, actually. As a child, I think maybe 8 or 9, I would kind of see outside my home every fortnight. That's bi-weekly, twice every other week. My daughter asked me the other day, what does fortnight mean? And then I realized that it's what we use in England, not here.
Right.
So bi-weekly, we would see this row of people chained and walk past our home every bi-weekly. And they looked disheveled. And I actually thought at that age that they were made prisoners. And I asked my mum one day, who are these people? And why are they being paraded outside the house looking disheveled? And she said, oh, they're from the local mental health institution. And that was their, bi-weekly walk. And that image, as I speak about it now, still, it's etched in my memory. And that was, I think, my earliest memory of mental illness or mental health. And that kind of spun and shaped my career, really. So I went in, moved into the UK at age 10, really interested in psychology and mental health and what makes people well mentally and what makes people unwell.
Yes.
And what does mental illness means. And anyway, I did my nursing in mental health. I worked in the UK in the mental health institution, really started to understand, the pendulum of being mentally well to crisis and then in between.
Right.
I moved to Canada when I finished my nursing degree and worked in the UK for a bit. And I just saw that there were so many different understanding of mental illness, mental well-being, but at the same time, the access. So I worked at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in the emergency room, mental health emergency room. And
also known as CAMH.
Also
right?
known as CAMH
Right.
in Toronto. And you would see people come into the mental health system brought in by sometimes police, sometimes family members. And that was their first encounter of any mental health service. So imagine you having your first mental breakdown,
Right.
and you're being brought in by police to a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to freak you out even, 100 times fold. And that again kind of spurred another interest in me. Like, why are people coming in when they're at the crisis mode? Why are people not coming in between that mental well-being or mental wellness and that crisis?
Well, why is that?
There are lots of different factors. I think that for what I saw personally, most of the people that were brought in by police and family members reluctantly, they were people of diverse backgrounds.
Yes.
So I would say a lot of Black people, a lot of Asians.
Yes.
And I think for culturally, certain cultures don't recognize mental illness, or they feel that, it will pass.
Yes.
Or they feel, or they use other methods. So they lean towards religion.
Right.
There's shame and stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And so they hide the person who's actually mentally unwell. And to the point where, they just can't do anymore and they need help urgently. And that's usually as a result of, something grave has happened. So they feeling perhaps psychologically unsafe for their well-being or the well-being of their loved one who's mentally ill. And so the last resort is to call the police. And so that was really sad for me to see that over and over again. And I think there's a huge disparity between folks who can navigate the system and folks who cannot navigate the system. And those that cannot navigate the system end up coming in with the police, sometimes handcuffed because they're acting aggressively, which any of us would if you had the police come to your door and handcuff you and take you to somewhere where you didn't know. Anyway, we're going on a tangent now.
But no, this is really, really fascinating because there are many different tangents here and different tentacles into the issue of dealing and addressing mental health. And one of them is recognizing that somebody is struggling or suffering.
Yes.
And realizing it before it becomes a crisis.
Definitely.
And so, and then what's also happening is that we are in a crisis in healthcare in Canada, where it's very complicated, but a lot of people who end up in Emerge are there because they don't have a family doctor, or they don't have a family therapist, or they don't have a support system, or the stigma and the shame around being unwell has prevented them from actually seeking and reaching out to get help.
Yeah.
So they come when things have really progressed. Would you say you've been here 20 years?
23.
23 years. I hate to ask the question, but do you think things are better, or do you think they are worse, or do you think there's somewhere in between?
Yeah. So I think that from an exposure standpoint, in terms of more people talking about mental well-being or mental illness or mental health, whichever one you choose, I think that there is an improvement in that to some extent, because we now have, celebrities that are coming in and coming out and talking about their, depression or anxiety or, postpartum and so on. And so there's more of an openness to talk about it.
Right.
But there's a difference between talking about it and actually seeking help.
Yes.
And so the work that I do now around workplace well-being, going back to your first question, the work that I do now around workplace well-being is focused on meeting people where they're at. So for me, I think it's really important that we highlight the importance of mental health and mental well-being in the workplace and in schools, because those are the areas that we spend most of our time in outside of work. And our colleagues get to know us really well. And our school peers get to know us really well. Our teachers get to know us really well, that they can pick up when we're not ourselves. Right? So if there's something happening where, Harriet's usually, pretty level-headed person and does good work, and some of that start to fray, where I'm not joining activities or joining social events, where I'm handing in my work late and my work is sloppy, or even in the school system it's the same, right? Or you're disruptive, or you're not participating in class discussions as you usually would. We need to arm our peers, whether those are colleagues or school peers or teachers or bosses, with the tools that they need to be able to recognize that, so that they can support us before we get to that crisis state.
Why are people in such a crisis?
Yeah. I think it's multiple reasons. You hear this over and over again. The pandemic hasn't helped, but I think aside from the pandemic, or as a consequence of the pandemic, there are other factors that are happening right now. You know, the economic situation is dire. We're in a recession. We're not in a recession. We're in a recession. It's inflation and all of that. And there's a study by the Mental Health Research Canada, which I have to give props to, because since the pandemic, they've been doing 6 monthly polls across Canada. And what they found is that people were anxious during the pandemic,
Yes.
and depression was down, but anxiety was up. And then as the pandemic kind of waned, depression increased and anxiety reduced. And one of the reasons we can kind of decipher about that is that people were started to think about, you know, all the things that they've missed out on and all the things that they've lost, especially youth, right? So a lot of children now, I think there was a study that was just published this week, actually, that looked at youth mental health.
Yes.
And a lot of youth tied it back to the absence of social belonging during the pandemic. And so they've been used to being on their screen, seeking validation, seeking belonging on screens.
Yes.
And as we know, social media is not always our best friend.
No.
And so we're seeing the effects of that. And so there's a crisis there amongst youth, and then amongst many other, you know, older people who took time off their work, their jobs, because they had to care for children or care for older parents. Yeah, the
Yes.
sandwich generation. And now it's trying to find a purpose and what's fulfilling, what fills my cup now that, you know, we're back in the normal world. But then it's compounded by everything else that's happening in the world, like the tariffs and the
Anxiety in the world, and
yes,
the war.
exactly.
And so we've gone. So we were in crisis mode, and people were
Yes.
adapting.
Yes.
And then you adapted to this sort of temporary life that you thought would end at some point.
Yes.
It's ended to a certain degree, but we are changed because of the pandemic and the experience of isolation.
Yeah.
So depression has increased and anxiety is
Reduced.
Yes. That's so. Do you think it's like grief? Is it a form of grief for what we used to have?
Definitely. I kind of akin this to, you know, I wasn't around in the First or Second World War, but I can imagine that
You
after
weren't?
No, I wasn't. I'm not that old.
I just thought you just keep being reborn again.
But, you know, I kind of feel that, you know, I can imagine that at the end of the Second World War, there was jubilation about the war being over, but then there's the aftermath of the war and the grief that you face with loss of loved ones and homes and family members and friends and purpose, really, and PTSD. So I think that we're going through a similar experience.
Do you think that's why burnout is such a huge deal right now? We're obsessively talking about burnout, especially burnout in the workplace, especially burnout for women.
Yeah.
Is burnout a result of what happened over the last 5 years?
I think partly, yes. I think that people are playing catch up. Organizations are playing catch up, right? Because we lost some time there. To be a successful organization, you always have to be innovative. You always have to be, you know, first out the gate.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of catch up. And with that comes more responsibility and put on the workforce. And the workforce are just tired. I was talking to a friend yesterday, actually, and she said, "Oh, did you hear that this other mutual friend of ours left her executive role? Like she just up and quit." And I said, "Oh," I was really quite surprised because she's very well known. And
Yes.
I said, "No, what happened? Like, why?" She just said she was tired.
Wow.
She was tired, and she said, I'm tired. I quit, and I'm taking 6 months off. I want to travel. I want to spend time with my children. I haven't known my children for the last 3-4 years,
Yes.
and I want to just reset."
Do you think it's the technology though as well? It's the kind of incessant, never ending, never turning off technology, information overload. Is this fueling it as well?
I think to some extent, yes.
Is there research that you've been involved in or aware of about it?
I haven't been involved in research from a workforce perspective, only from like a youth and school perspective. But I do think that the pandemic, during the pandemic, I always said, we're living at work because you were on Zoom. People knew where you were. I remember an occasion where I'd moved because I wanted a different view. I'd moved from my home office to my living room or something, and somebody on the call, they were like, "Oh, where are you?" And I thought, "Oh, what?" I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Oh, your surroundings are different." So people that I wouldn't usually invite to my home were in my home virtually. Yes. And I think that as a result of that, we felt comfortable just being on all the time, whether you're in your kitchen or you're in your living room or your home office. You were just on all the time. And it's like, well, Harriet's home anyway, so I can just send her a message at 7 and just expect that she would call. And post-pandemic, actually, there was a movement to include, many organizations did this where you included in the footnote of your signature to say, I may have sent this at a time that's not reasonable for you, but I don't expect that you would respond.
Yes.
But to some extent, I think those were just words, because if your boss sends you a message at 10:05,
you respond. Yes, exactly.
And the accessibility to your workers with the help or hindrance of technology has made it so that we're always on.
Well, the boss probably would also say, "Why didn't she answer?"
Exactly.
Like, well, I sent it at 10:05. It's obviously important.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I started this new role as the VP of Mental Health at Green Shield, I felt, this was the first for Green Shield. They'd never had a mental health, anybody really, much less an exec. And I just felt that there was a need for me to be present all the time, right? And my husband would say to me that I'd go up to my office at 8:30 or whatever.
Yes.
And some days I wouldn't come down until 4 or 5.
Yes.
Or I'd come down at noon, make something quickly, go back upstairs, and I wouldn't come back down until 5, 6. And I did that over and over again. And I often joked that, some days I didn't even remember to pee because I just felt like this is a big opportunity, right? Like with much opportunity comes with more responsibility comes,
much opportunity comes great responsibility.
Great responsibility, exactly. Yeah. To those that are given more, much more is expected, right?
Yes.
And so I just felt that much more was expected until the point that I actually got really unwell.
Yeah.
I got really sick. I actually ended up with sepsis.
What?
Yes. I ended up with sepsis. I had a urine infection, UTI. Maybe this is too much information, but oh well, it's out the door now. I ended up with UTI, and the doctors think maybe because I wasn't taking enough, bathroom breaks.
That's right.
And I ended up with a UTI. I was on antibiotics. Finished that. Thought I was okay. Was taking my daughter back from her activity on a Saturday, and I just felt these chills, and I thought, oh, why am I feeling so cold? And I got home. I was going to make her something to eat, and I remember standing in front of the stove, and I'm trying to make this food, and everything is just going blur. My husband's out with my son. My daughter's home. And I said to my daughter, just going to lie down, darling. Like, can you just finish off your toast or whatever I was making for her? I'm just going to lie down. And I lay down, and I was freezing. I had 2 blankets over me, freezing. I couldn't stop the shakes. My daughter comes, she's like, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm just really cold. She said, but mommy, it's hot. And I thought, I'll be okay. My husband comes in and he says, what's wrong? I said, I'm so cold. He literally had to carry me upstairs to bed. An hour later, he said, I'm calling the ambulance. And that was what saved me, because when they came, they took me down to the emerge, and I had sepsis.
I have chills.
And I had to have
so dangerous.
IV, yes. That's life-threatening.
Life-threatening. And in a matter of minutes to hours, your life can be altered.
Exactly. And so that was really a turning point for me, that my well-being comes first, because when you're wheeled out of your home on a stretcher and your children are standing there in tears, worried, and your husband looks like his world is crumbling,
yes,
it's not an image that you want to relive.
Or
Yeah.
that you even thought would happen.
Yeah.
And you thought you were in control.
Yeah. And this is coming from somebody who has a mental health,
And a
clinical
clinical
background.
background.
Yeah. And funny thing is, like, the stretcher coming down my stairs left markings on my stairs. And the first thing I wanted to do when I got back was to restain the stairs. And my husband said, no, that's a reminder of you looking after yourself. And that this happened 3 years ago. And those markings are still on the stairs to this day, because that's a reminder that I can't go back there.
What did you change immediately?
Yeah. What I
after?
changed immediately was I sent a message to my boss saying that my health comes first. Luckily, he was very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
You've got
an amazing CEO.
Yeah. He really, our CEO was really good. And my boss at the time was good too. And I said, I'm not going to be checking my emails between 5 and 8. At 8, I may check for 5 minutes if there's anything urgent, but I may not. I said, if you need me urgently, you can text me, but don't expect to respond if it's not urgent. So I put a timeline on myself, and up until now, till this day, I still live that to some extent, right? Like at 6 o'clock, laptop's shut, and that's my family time. And if I have any work to do after, dinner and kids are gone to bed, I may or may not. And I often said, if you're not in the business of like saving lives, like if you're not a surgeon who has to be on call 24/7, or you're not in the stock market where you're having to like cater to other time zones, everything else can wait, right? Like your health comes first, your family comes first. And that's the biggest thing for me that I've changed. And other things too, just taking care of myself. Like this morning I was up at 7 and downstairs in the gym and made sure I got my gym time in.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is, it's a very, it's a complex conversation from this point of view. So many women.
Yeah.
And so many women of color feel like they cannot say no, or they cannot put parameters around how they work, because there's this overwhelming pressure that you're not good enough, or that you can't do the job. Or I don't know if you read recently, apparently, in the last quarter in the US, Black women lost jobs at rates unlike any other group.
Yeah.
And there's this backlash. And it's the very fear that a lot of African American women and Afro-Canadian women in the Black diaspora experience of like, I've got to hold it all together. I cannot afford, this is what I hear a lot.
Right.
I can't afford to be sick. I can't afford to slow down. Is that a pressure that you, I don't want to assume.
Yeah.
Is it a pressure that you experience?
No.
I
would say no, categorically no. I know I'm good enough. I know that my work speaks for itself. I don't suffer, thankfully, from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I know my worth, and I think that's a blessing. And thankfully, I've shown my worth to people that are that I report to, or people that are watching externally, right? Like I often get messages on LinkedIn or emails saying, I've seen what you're doing, and just kudos.
Yes.
And that fills my cup, right? It's not a brag. It's not me kind of showing off, but it's me owning the space that I've created for myself, right? I don't go into, and I think this is partly the way I was brought up as well. Like I spent my earlier years in Nigeria, and everybody's Black, and so you don't know any different, right? Like there's no, and I think that in moving to the UK, one thing that my family always said, I come from a large family. I have 10 sisters, and
what?
Yeah.
10 sisters.
Yeah. 10 older sisters, and I'm the youngest, so I often said I had 11 mothers. And they often said to me, don't ever let your color determine what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I walk into a room, I don't assume that, oh gosh, I'm the only Black woman here, or I'm the only woman here. I'm here because I need to be here. I'm here because I've earned
This
the
moment,
right to be here. And it especially reinforces that when I'm on panels, right? And people often ask me, do you ever get nervous? And I say, well, sometimes I do, but the fact that I'm standing up here and you're not, you're in the audience,
yes,
is reinforcing for me, is reassuring for me that I've earned the right to be here.
yeah,
And so I take up my space. I don't take up my space as a woman or a Black woman. I take up my space as Harriet Ekperigin, as the person that I have been raised to be, and the work that I've put in to be where I need to get to where I am today. And that's how I show up.
Talk to me about being Nigerian then.
Yeah.
About, because this is a very nuanced also perspective, and I think we kind of, in the diaspora, there is conflict sometimes between groups, because in some parts of the world where people are Black, there's no definition of being Black because they're in a majority. And then they come to a part of the world where Black is a thing.
Yeah.
And they have to kind of do a mental adjustment around, or do they? That's also a question, around this society may see you a certain way, but that's not who we are.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How did you experience that transition?
This is going to sound really silly or really naive. I say naivete. But it's only really like recently through, as I've had children and raising biracial children, that I've been kind of doing a bit of retroactive thinking through times that I may have experienced racism, right? Because I don't know, but it didn't register for me. It just didn't register for me. Like going to move into England from Nigeria, I was just so happy to be in a new country that I think that I was just naive to everything else. The only thing I would say that couple of things that I remembered is, one, being teased about my accent. And funnily enough, I wasn't teased about my accent by white people. I was teased about my accent by other Black friends or Black
folks,
peers, right?
Yes.
Why do you talk like that? And so that was one. And then the second was around my hair, because I had, when you're in Nigerian school, you have to have short cropped hair.
Right.
Because school is not somewhere you're supposed to be fashionable. You're supposed to go and learn. And so when I moved to the UK, I had short cropped hair, and everybody else had, their jerry curls and whatnot. And so I was teased for that. But again, not by white folks, by other Black girls, because I went to an all-girls school. And those were the only two that I really recall. I think I was just so naive to it. Because I came from Nigeria and everyone was Black, I didn't expect that I would be treated any differently, because I'd never been treated differently back home.
But in Nigeria, there are different categories of how people are, how the society is structured.
Yes.
How does that frame your mind?
Yeah. So in Nigeria, there is colorism, right?
Okay.
So I remember I had two good friends. One was a little darker than me. The other one was way lighter than both of us. And everyone kind of thought, oh, she's so pretty because she's yellow. That's what we would say. Right? She's yellow skin. She's so pretty. And we were just okay. And so there was that. And there continues to be that colorism that exists, that bias, and people bleaching their skins. But that's another mental health topic. We can have that chat another day, because that's that is a sign of beauty, being fairer skinned, right?
Right.
But it didn't really impact me from a mental health perspective, like, oh, I'm darker skinned than Tina or whatever. But going to England, I never saw that. I was just so happy to be in a new country and have new friends, and my sisters were there, so rekindling with my sisters, and I think I didn't pay any mind to it, and some people might say that, that you were being naive or stupid, but I think it served me well to some extent because I haven't had to carry that with me. And one of the things that I belong to an all women's book club, and one of the debates that we always have is the feeling that people already have a predetermined ideation or notion of you before you even walk into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that reinforces your negative beliefs about yourself, right? That when something does happen, it's this learned behavior or learned helplessness. That when something does happen that doesn't go your way, you immediately think, oh, it's because I'm Black.
Right.
Or it's because I'm a woman.
I love this conversation. We certainly didn't talk about what we would talk about, but I love it because I don't think we get to talk enough about the psychological beliefs that we take for granted.
Yes.
About race and how people will perceive you. And I've always felt that someone else's perception and definition of me is their definition of me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I am aware that their definition can impact how they treat me or how they perceive me.
Yeah.
But it's still not the definition that I have of myself.
Exactly.
And I think this is one of the traumas for North American and Afro-Caribbean Africans outside of Africa is that racism has been such an extreme part of our history that everything is seen through the lens of racism.
Yeah.
And, I had a conversation with someone this morning and they were talking about, about privilege. And I was suggesting to them that we all have privilege in multiple ways. And they were really disturbed by what I was saying. But there's a problem when you always see yourself through the lens of others and through the lens of the structure of racism.
Exactly.
Because it means that you are always having to have these multiple personalities where you're yourself and then you're the self that you think other people think you are and then you're trying to surpass that self. And it's
exhausting.
It's exhausting. And I think it contributes to the deterioration of mental health for many Black people in North America because you have to have these multiple perspectives. And then then you get the people who are like, I don't care about racism. Racism doesn't define me. And I also think, that's a stance that maybe helps them to be healthy. Yeah. I don't know if it's realistic, but there's something about trying to get to who am I as a human being in the institution or the infrastructure that exists. Yeah. Like, who am I?
Yeah. You have to be comfortable with yourself because in life we will experience different types of prejudices, whether we are Black, Asian, woman, man,
tall,
short, right? Different sexual orientation. And you have to be comfortable in yourself because knowing that you will experience these things can have a huge negative impact. And you have to have a strong mind. Like, to your point, your beliefs about me does not define who I am.
No.
My beliefs about myself defines who I am.
Yes.
And you can throw stones at me and I can decide whether I want to stand there and get hit by the stone or whether I want to step aside and keep moving.
Exactly.
And I choose the latter.
Yes.
Right? But I do, having said all this, I do empathize and I do understand that not everybody is able to do that. And that certain beliefs and certain trauma has shaped the way that they see themselves. And that impacts the way that they walk into the room or choose not to walk into the room for fear of that, for fear of that reinforcement of the beliefs that they have about themselves.
Well, and also it influences how you react to what is happening to you. So if you perceive the experience as racist or sexist or that it's about your external superficial beingness, you may respond in a certain way.
Definitely.
Or you could decide no matter, and don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about if the police pull you aside and harm you or something like that. No offense to police, but offense. Also, offense to anyone who harms people based on what they look like. But I digress again. Oh my God. But it's really critical that mentally you understand, like, who am I?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? What do I stand for? And I think especially with our kids is that we reinforce that for them, that you are always more than what anyone sees you as.
Yes. And it starts from there, right? It starts from childhood. We need to start building those resilience skills in our children. And whatever we've been through in our lives, we need to make sure that we don't impart that on our children, and that we're building strong, resilient children that can answer those questions. Who am I? And what is my purpose? And my purpose is not what other people think it is. And I am not what other people think I am, for good or bad, right?
Yes.
And you can say all the nicest things. Oh, she's so lovely, she's so nice, and I just love her. But do you love yourself? That's what really matters, right? Do you think you're worthy? Do you think you're, as good as other people might say or not say? And that's what's important.
And where do you learn that? Where do you learn to love yourself?
Yeah, I think you find people around you that you trust. I think it comes down to that. It's people around you that you trust. And when my children were growing up, I had a mantra for them, right? And they're 14 now. And I still remind them of that, right? My daughter's mantra is, I'm kind, I'm smart, and nobody can steal my happiness. Right? I'm smart, I'm kind, and nobody can steal my happiness. My son is, I am bold, and I'm bold, I am strong, and I can do anything. I'm bold, I'm strong, and I can do anything. And those are the mantras, and it's reinforcing that over and over again. And 14 years later, I still remind them of that. I just reminded my son of that yesterday. And at times they won't feel that way. They won't feel smart. They won't feel kind. They won't feel strong or bold. But they need to know that everything is time. Everything passes. That's what I say to them as well, right? Like, everything bad that's happening to you now, whether you're having arguments with friends or you didn't get that math test result that you wanted, it's time and it will pass. And not being stuck in that rut.
I think though for it's the same for us, but it's even more so for kids, preteens and teens in particular, the pressure from other teens.
Yes.
Like, one of my great discoveries in raising children was realizing how much of an impact the external world.
Yes.
And I don't mean the institutional world, but the friendship world.
Yes.
How their friends and their peers and the people in their classroom, how they perceive themselves and how they perceive my kids.
Yes.
And how they operate.
And how they influence.
Oh, it's like, if I could say anything to parents, you think what you're doing is really important, and it is. And how you treat your kids, absolutely, it's essential. But you have to be aware that your kids leave the house and they are going to be impacted by other people. And some of those people are good, and some of those people aren't good, and some of those people have very low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And they may see things in your kids and want to target them for whatever reasons. And our kids have to be able to say, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Water off a duck's back, right? Like, keep moving.
Keep moving.
Keep moving. And coming back to how we started all of this. And I think, and these are the reasons why mental health is so important. Building them up so that they really know who they are and what's their purpose, and that they might get off track now and again, but they always have to be able to come back on track. And having people that trust, that they can trust and go to, right? Like their parents, or if they don't feel comfortable with that, a teacher or another older adult that they can go to, that can really tell them what's up, right? That can really be honest with them, and do check-ins with them.
What is the role of schools in doing that, in supporting that work?
I think the
or
role
care
of,
or care.
I think it should be, it's more than it used to be, and it should be more than it used to be, because our children spend an awful lot of time there, right? So it's moved from just going in and learning your math and language and going home to going in and learning your math and language and your emotional well-being.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of schools are investing in their teachers in terms of mental health training, picking up when a student might not be themselves, and beyond that, how to have that conversation with the student, how to build the trust with the student so that they can open up to you and not just say, I'm fine.
Right. But I wonder though, if we are asking teachers to do too much, that perhaps we need a system that has, these specialists who can do that work, not just for the student, but for the teacher, because I see a lot of teachers who are really struggling. They're really struggling.
Yeah.
And
not the teacher's place to become a counselor, but it's the teacher's place to identify when a child is not being themselves, right? And then they make that connection with a school social worker or a school counselor or a clinical person within the school. I think that every school today should have a clinical person supporting them, or more. Again, back to that budget, right? They should have at least one clinical person supporting them.
It's wild.
It's wild
that we don't, that some schools don't at all.
Some schools don't, and some schools have one clinical person that goes around 5-6 different schools, and they can do like half a day, or 2-3 hours per school per week, or 2-3 hours per month, and that's not sufficient in the world that we're living in today. We need more than that.
Yes.
And teachers can be equipped with the tools to recognize and to how to open up that door and have that conversation. But then you're right, they need to be able to connect them with a clinical expert that can do that work and support that child.
What do you think we can do immediately to help mental health in the workplace?
Research is in, right? The research shows that if you're not taking care of your workforce, if you're not taking care of your staff, you are going to experience higher rates of presenteeism, absenteeism, and
low productivity,
lack of productivity, right? And at the end of the day, if we can drum that into the heads of those in charge and decision makers, then that matters to them. You got to find that it's the carrot or the stick, right? You got to find what is the value proposition for the decision makers.
And it's not woohoo. It's real, evidence based. It transforms your workforce when you pay attention, especially right now.
Exactly. And if you're looking at things like your short-term disability numbers or your long-term disability numbers, and you're comparing that with, maybe 10 years ago, you will see that it's increased. And you will see that when you look at the reasons behind it. Before, it used to be more related to physical work. So, back pain, or, a higher increase in short-term disability and long-term disability in people that actually do physical work. But now what we're seeing is like the rates of folks that are reporting episodes of anxiety and depression and stress is actually higher in some organizations than those that, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, where it was more aligned to, physical reasons.
Right.
And so I think those things together are all indications that you must act now. Like the workplace is not just, come in and do your work and go home and deal with your mental health.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No.
Like it's all encompassing, right? So holistically, we owe it to our staff to ensure that we're providing the resources for them. Because if we're waiting for the public's services to provide those resources, they're going to be waiting a very long time, right? So you want to make sure that your staff are healthy, they're getting the support they need so that they can return to work as soon as possible, and have a positive impact on your bottom line.
And so what are 3 ways that you recommend that we do that.
So a couple of things that we're doing in our organization and our wellness right now is being led by me in terms of the initiatives I think that are worthwhile. I think the first thing is talking about things, right?
Yes.
So next week we actually have one of our senior leaders that's going to share his mental health journey story. And that's huge.
Huge.
Because you don't get that.
No.
Senior leaders don't want to talk about that kind of thing.
The fragility.
Right? The fragility,
No,
the vulnerability. They don't want to be vulnerable. And I often say vulnerability is a superpower that's underutilized by senior leaders. And so I'm actually interviewing him. So he's going to do a little 15-minute TED Talk type thing. And then I'll throw some questions. And then I will have folks ask questions to him. And what this does is that it shows the employees that they're not alone.
Yes.
It shows that, and in my prep conversation with him, Greenshield offers $10,000 for counseling or therapy to all their salaried staff.
What?
Yes.
Wait. Hello. Let's just say it again.
Yeah. So as of January of this year, all salaried Greenshield employees get $10,000 worth of therapy, no copay. And so in my prep with this particular senior leader, he said, I'm probably going to utilize all of my $10,000 this year and then some. Right?
My mouth is on the floor. That's groundbreaking.
Yeah. And so I think it encourages, and what we're trying to do as well is encourage people to utilize the benefits that they've been given, because if you don't have it, you're likely to complain that it's not there. And if you do have it and you're not using it because there's shame or stigma involved or fear of, I don't want to go to therapy because somebody's going to know about it and then it's going to impact, my promotion or whatever. Then we want to make sure that people are using it. So that's one way. So breaking that stigma and encouraging people to actually utilize the benefits that they've been given. And then the second is around social events and just reintegrating people. Like, we are across the country, so we can't often do things in person together, but finding other ways. And I think this is one of the positive things about technology and virtual, right? And so we're doing things like, your typical yoga and meditation. But I think the key thing for me is a lot of companies do these things. They put on like yoga, but ensuring that you're bringing in the leaders.
Yeah, that they're participating.
That they're participating
is critical.
And leading.
Yes.
Like, we have meditation sessions and they're quick. Morning sessions are quick wake you up. Afternoon sessions are a quick booster. And those are actually led by leaders. They're led by senior leaders, VPs, SVPs. And they're the ones that are showing up and saying, okay, let's have a moment here and let's just ground ourselves for the day, or let's ground ourselves for the afternoon lull and pick up ourselves in terms of, that getting that 3:00 energy back so that we can finish off the day strong. And the leaders, and I'll tell you, Che, not every leader is comfortable doing it.
Yes.
But again, we're letting them know that this is really important for your workforce.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so that's the second thing that we're doing. And then the third thing that we're doing is kind of measuring what we're putting in place, right? Like, if we, like, back to that, I was saying, if you build it, will they come? If you build it, will you see the outcomes? And so constantly getting feedback from people in terms of what you're doing, and then pivoting if it's not working. Like, if I'm having a yoga session at 7:00 every Monday and only 3 people out of 1,500 are coming, then it's time to change. Or if
it might not be yoga.
Coming, it might not be yoga. It could be anything else, right? Like, it might not be yoga that's needed. Maybe it's getting out and going for a walk in walk groups, power groups, and something else. But hearing from your employees as to what's working and what's not working, and then taking into consideration their feedback, I think is the third thing that you can do. And then measuring it, right? Like, what impact is that having on your investments? What are we've got $10,000. A, are people using it? And B, if they are using it, are we seeing that the short-term disabilities and the long-term disability numbers as well as reasons are changing?
Right. And I think the research is showing, I don't have the exact data in front of me, but I did see something a few months ago. Oh my God, I've got to find it. And it showed that a lot of organizations offer not anywhere near what you're offering for mental health,
Mhm.
but they offer funding for it, and the
It's not
the
being
employees
used.
aren't using it
Yeah.
because it's actually not enough. So they don't
Mm.
want to start,
Mm.
and they also don't have the funds to copay.
Yes.
So it's actually quite groundbreaking what you're doing, and it would be really fascinating to know, at the end of the year, or
Yeah.
how much of it was used, because
Exactly.
that will tell you a
Yeah.
lot about what people's needs are.
Yeah.
Listen, we
100%.
could go on. I think you
I
should
know.
come back on and we should talk. I wanted to also ask you just a cheeky question, because I am quite short and you are quite
Quite tall.
statuesque. And and what is it like being the tallest woman? Is that not true?
No, it is true. I'm 6'1" on a good day.
On a good
On
day,
a good
because I
day.
was thinking 6'2". I was thinking 6'2" from where I'm standing.
No, I'm 6'1". I do like wearing heels. So some days I'm 6'4", some days
Okay.
I'm 6'4.5". It wasn't always nice, right? Like I
Right.
hated it growing up because I could never find clothes. I often had to wear like my sister's clothes, or go. My friends would shop in the youth section, the cool girl section. I
Yes.
would be shopping in the women's section
Yes.
because the pants weren't, or trousers weren't quite long enough, or the sleeves weren't quite long enough, or I wore men's jeans for the longest time and men's sweats because the sleeves were long enough. But I've really grown to just love it and just embrace it.
Yes.
And I think that when you feel back to that your comment around who am I and what is my purpose, and when you feel that you know who you are and you feel that nobody else needs to define you, you just own it.
Yes.
You just own it. And, who cares if my sleeves are short? I'll just roll them up and make it look fashionable.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I like it now. I love it now.
Yeah. And it's just about embracing who you are.
It is.
Through it. Like, it's just.
And just carrying yourself. Right?
Yes.
Carry the way you carry yourself. Like I'm wearing running shoes right now with a dress. I'm like, who cares? I throw in a nice bag and the rest is history.
You look very, very London or New York to me in Fashion Week. So I'm denying the audience the opportunity to see you, but that will change soon. Listen, Harriet, I am so grateful for your time, for your presence, for your light, and I thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's been it's really nice to have these conversations because I don't often, everything that we talked about today, I would usually find myself having conversations about parts of it, but not all encompassing. So I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time. And my friends, if you loved this episode, and I know you did, please share it, please comment, and make sure you subscribe. My friends, thank you for joining me on Let's Talk, produced by Wise Mindly Inc. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take action, reflect, or embrace on a new way of thinking, on a new path. And if you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you did, don't forget to subscribe, share, and even leave a review. Reviews matter. They allow us to do way more than we're doing now. Let's continue the journey of growth and well-being together. Until next time, I'm Coach Che Marville. Stay connected, stay curious, and let's keep talking.